So let's take a look at Learning Targets 1.1 and 1.2 from the Unit 1 test. It's really important that you pay attention both to the notation in the problem itself and the notation on what you are asked to draw. It's also probably a good idea to sort of mark off things that you've done, maybe not cross them out, but highlight them or underline them, saying, I have finished with that, because some people are forgetting bits and pieces of their notation. So the first thing this asks me to do, and it does say to use a straight edge as I'm doing this, although since I'm writing on this, I will not be using a straight edge. It says to draw segment EP with midpoint S. So the first thing I need to do is have a segment EP, and again, on my answer key, this is much straighter, and on your test, this should be much straighter. So segment EP with midpoint S, which means S is in the middle. However, somebody looking at this figure would not know that it is midpoint S unless I put the proper notation on. And that's to show that S bisects segment EP so that segment ES and segment SP are congruent to each other. They have the same length. Now I'm going to underline that because not only did I draw segment EP, but I drew midpoint S and I have the correct notation. Draw a non-collinear point N. So N cannot fall on this segment and it can't fall in line with this segment. So I couldn't put N out here. So I need point N out here somewhere. So draw a non-collinear point N. Draw ray NZ. It's kind of hard to see on this copy. So that these two things are parallel. Segment EP and ray NZ are parallel. Well, if it's ray NZ, it means it has endpoint N and it goes through point Z and then continues on, so I need the arrow at the end, continues on into infinity in that direction. Now again, somebody looking at this cannot tell for sure that these things are parallel unless I show them that they are. So I'm going to do these two little arrows and these two little arrows on this one. That means these are parallel. So I drew these so that they are parallel and I have the correct notation. So the next problem says draw line VB perpendicular to segment NT. And then I'm just going to read the rest of the problem to myself. E bisects segment NT. So, first I think I'm going to draw segment NT with E as a bisector, because I'm thinking that's maybe a good place to start, even though it's not the first thing they say. Segment NT, if E is a bisector, bisect means to divide it into two equal portions. So E is actually the midpoint of the segment, and I need to show that those two halves then are congruent to each other. I need to draw a line VB so that it's perpendicular to this segment. Now, I could draw a line VB anywhere on this segment so that it's perpendicular. It's probably easier not to draw it in the middle of one of these halves somewhere, because then it might mess up my congruent notation here. So I would recommend, if this is the case, I would either draw a line VB through point E or through one of the endpoints. I'm going to go ahead and just draw it through point E. If it's line VB, I need point V and point B somewhere on the line. They could be together. Point V here, point B just below it. They don't have to be on opposite sides of E, but it needs to be a line that goes through both point V and point B. So I drew this. Now it says it's perpendicular. Although it looks perpendicular, the only way that people are going to know that is if I do that notation. Do not do it in all four places. You only need it here because then all of these are right angles. This is just a notation on an already existing figure. Segment AB is congruent to segment CB, so AB is congruent to CB. They have the same number of marks through them. Angle A is congruent to angle C, so angle A is congruent to angle C. And that's all I need. And I could have had 2 marks through these if I wanted to. I could have had 3 marks through each of these if I wanted to. As long as these number of marks are the same, it means these two are congruent. As long as these number of marks are the same, it means those two are congruent. So point E is the midpoint of segment AB. So if it's the midpoint, it means that it bisects it, and segment AE is congruent to segment EB. Segment EF is perpendicular to segment AB, so I need that. Again, don't put it on both sides. It's not necessarily necessary, and it tends to kind of look sloppy. And ray AG is an angle bisector. If it's an angle bisector, it means that this angle and this angle are congruent to each other. So I need all of that notation for learning target 1.1 and 1.2 on the Unit 1 test.